I don't even know where to begin. There's so much wrong with this show. And while I was watching it, I had moments of hope that maybe things would be a little better than last season. But it's just a mess. It really does feel like bad fan fiction. But also not, because fan fiction is obviously written by fans who know at least some things about the characters they're writing for. And this show just doesn't feel that way. I'm going to break down everything, talk about everything that was bad. So, strap in. Okay, after an action-packed opening, the show starts with Picard back at his winery harvesting grapes. And there's some very forced sexual tension between him and his Romulan lady friend, Laris. They share a drink together, and he says, "Cheers, big ears." And that was my first real eye roll of the episode, but it would not be the last. And he completely blows it with Laris. He crashes and burns. Maybe that big ears line had something to do with it. I don't know. And then we get a flashback to Picard as a boy. And he's apparently growing up in a fucking Charles Dickens story. I mean, look at this shit. He looks like a young Finn Bell. And then he has a conversation with his very English-sounding mother, who was clearly French in The Next Generation, but whatever. I guess that doesn't really matter. And it's heavily implied that Picard's father was abusive towards his mother. And there's some violent flashbacks, and some of which seem to indicate that his father might have even killed his mother. I really hope that's not the case. And I know, I'm fully aware that this is something that Patrick Stewart has had to deal with in his personal life. I understand that. With his own parents. I get that. And I'm not at all making light of it. But I don't feel like it applies to Picard. I think they're shoehorning it into this character's backstory. Is it possible? Sure, there's nothing that really contradicts it in his history, but it's never mentioned in any conversation between him and his brother on TNG. And I just kind of want to believe that humans are past this type of shit in the 24th century. Maybe that's naive. And some people might erroneously accuse me of being some kind of Roddenberry purist, but I think there's a way you can show this type of commentary on abuse without backloading it into Picard's history. And the implication is that the whole reason he joined Starfleet was to get away from all this pain with his family. And I just don't think that works. He was always a natural explorer. I know he wanted to get away from his brother, who was always kind of a dickhead to him and a bit of a bully, and his father was openly critical of him. But there's nothing to indicate that he or anyone else in his family was physically abused. And I just think it's kind of a square peg in a round hole situation. And I don't think it's a good idea to imply that his abuse made him a better person. I don't think that we should be saying, hey, some good came out of it, And frankly, this character has experienced enough trauma in his life to draw from. Serious trauma. You don't have to invent something new to work with. And I just don't think it's necessary. Anyway, this is getting kind of heavy, so let's move on. Picard starts giving a speech for some new cadets at Starfleet Academy, and it turns out that everyone from last season is just back in Starfleet. Raffi is back, Elnor is the first Romulan in Starfleet, and Rios is in command of his own ship. I mean, they seemed so anti-Starfleet last season, but here they are, back in the saddle. And is Starfleet just a revolving door? Can you just quit and be reinstated just like that? It's very weird. And Rios is constantly holding this unlit cigar, and he even puts it in his mouth a few times, and it's one of the douchiest things I've ever seen. It's so bad. It actually made me laugh a few times. It was just ridiculous. And why? Why does this character need a cigar? I mean, it just feels like a weird stereotype that the writers aren't even aware of. And it also feels like a not so subtle shot at Gene Roddenberry, who famously said that nobody smokes in Starfleet. So, I just don't get the point of it. But anyway, Rios is the captain of the Stargazer, which, of course, was Picard's first ship that he was a captain of. So there's a bit of a nostalgia bait there for you. Oh, and there's also a scene where Dr. Girardi returns and she jokes about murdering her ex-boyfriend and getting away with it. So, I mean, that's just delightful. And then there's a nice scene with Picard and Guinan. At least it starts off that way. I did like it for the most part. Up until the moment where they basically imply that Picard's desire to explore was just a front, that he uses it to get away from what's really bothering him. Because why would anyone just want to explore the universe? That's just silly, apparently. They even make it obvious that it was never a believable motivation for his character. Because he absolutely needs some underlying horrific backstory that compels him to want to do that. It's just frustrating. And he's also seeking advice from Guinan about relationships, it seems. They talk about his past a bit, but of course, not even a single mention of Beverly Crusher. I swear, if this show goes 2 full seasons without acknowledging or even referencing Beverly Crusher in any way, then don't try to tell me that this is some deep character study of Jean-Luc Picard. Because she's an extremely important figure in his life. And to ignore her is just a fundamental mishandling of both their characters on every fucking level. And basically, the episode introduces the Borg, I guess. I mean, nothing about it looks like the Borg to me. They went from ships that are symmetrical in shape to this fucking weird-looking Rorschach test. And the Borg Queen looks more like Bloodsport from the Suicide Squad. But whatever. And somehow all these characters from the last season end up on the Stargazer together. It's a very convenient and coincidental reunion, if you ask me. And the Borg are sort of asking for help. They seem like they want to negotiate peace. For some reason, Picard and almost everyone else wants to try to extend an olive branch to the Borg. I mean, I'm exasperated. The only one who talks sense is Seven. She says, you can't trust the Borg. It's probably a deception. And everyone else is like, well, let's see. It could be great for the Federation. It makes perfect sense to try to talk to the Borg. And Girardi says, and I quote, we could be putting a bullet into the greatest ally the Federation may ever have. What the fuck? I mean, it's laughable. And Seven is the only one who says they should destroy the Borg ship. And why Picard would disagree with this, it's fucking beyond me. I have no idea. I mean, he knows the Borg just as much as Seven does. So it makes no sense to me. You see, the Borg they're not a race of people with a culture and a way of life. They're just basically a very complex computer program, and their only goal is to consume. Negotiating with the Borg is like trying to negotiate with some malware on your computer, or a group of flesh-eating zombies. It's really a combination of the two. It just doesn't work. And the Borg ship takes advantage of their willingness to talk, of course, and they shoot some kind of transporter beam into the Stargazer. And instead of firing, Captain Rios, the cigar-smoking douchebag, orders security to the bridge. Why he didn't just say, hey, target the source of that beam and fire, I'll never know. So, naturally, the Borg Queen shows up on the bridge, and she looks like if the Hunter class from Destiny 2 fucked Dr. Octopus. And she starts hacking into all the ship's shit, and everyone on the bridge hesitates. They don't do anything but look at her. And Seven finally shoots at her, and then everyone else starts shooting, because Starfleet is dumb.
Now you see that evil will always triumph, because good is dumb.
So Picard activates the auto-destruct sequence, and I don't know why a retired admiral still has the code for auto-destruct on a ship that he technically never served on, but whatever. They blow up, and Picard finds himself back home at his vineyard. And Q shows up, and he's all menacing, with a fucking boutonniere on his jacket. And the preview for the next episode shows that Q has changed the entire Federation into a fascist society. It's basically the mirror universe. I mean, that seems to be just how the writers feel about humanity. We're all just a bunch of assholes, and they have no idea how to tell stories without making humans behave like monsters. And that's fine. But I don't need to see that from Star Trek. And basically, the characters have to go back in time to fix what Q did, which is something that Star Trek has done over and over and over and over again. It's just enough at this point. It does nothing for me. We've seen this before, and we've seen it done better. It's just really disappointing, and there's such a huge disconnect between the Star Trek we know and this, in my opinion. If you can see how it fits and it makes sense to you, that's great. But I just don't see it. It feels like Star Trek has been body snatched, and there's just an alien living inside it. And maybe that's what it is. If I were to come up with a headcanon explanation for some of this, it would be that the android body that Picard is now supposedly inhabiting is malfunctioning, and his memories are corrupted. I mean, and he's just a broken android who is thinking of his past wrongly. Maybe that's why he forgot Beverly Crusher, because it just didn't transfer. That's the only thing I could think of. And it obviously doesn't even explain half the shit in the show, but it's a start. I don't know. Obviously, I didn't enjoy it, in case that's not clear. But let me know what you thought. Do you like it? Are you with me on this? Are you hyped? Have you given up on Star Trek altogether? Let me know. And honestly, I can't promise if I'm going to do a video on this every week. I know I said I would, but I feel like I could seriously tap out at any moment. I'm at my wit's end already. So we'll see. But if I finish it, maybe I'll do something at the end where I talk about the whole season. Kind of like with Boba Fett and Peacemaker. But I don't know. That's all I got for now. Just remember, if the Borg show up and they want to negotiate, don't believe them. They're fucking lying. It's the Borg.
Captain, do we fire?
Not yet. They can't transport through our shields.
Queen is actually coming. Rios, don't wait until it's too late. Fire!
Open a channel.